What's going on, everybody? My name is Will Tran and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be sound designing a fight scene. As I said in the last video, sound design can go two ways. One is very grounded with very quick and fast sound effects. Or we can go very big and grandiose to where the sounds almost sound a little cartoony. We're gonna be sound designing a fight scene in both of these styles, and if you wanna follow along, I'm gonna put the fight clip that we're gonna be sound designing in the top right corner for you guys to download. All right, let's hop into Premiere and let's get to it. Okay, so here we are in Premiere. We got this fight scene right here that I shot a long time ago with my buddy Joe. Like I said, if you want this fight clip and you wanna follow along, I'm gonna put it in the top right corner for you guys to download. Okay. The first thing that we're going to do with this fight scene is, first of all, we're going to handle the hits and blocks first. Those are always the first things that I always tackle whenever it comes to the sound designing process of a fight scene. So I got 3 different sound packs from the Tony Jacks Action sound pack. You don't have to get the sound pack, of course. There are many other free fight sound packs that you can get. The only thing that you want to avoid is making your sound design sound like this. I've said this a million times before, light slapping is not fight sound design. I'm gonna go into my sound pack, and the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go to the first strike. So the first strike, whenever my foot hits his chest, here we go. Let's just add a basic punch or some sort of hit. So I do know in these sound packs I use 3, 5, and 6. 3 and 5 have faster, quicker sound effects that sound a little more grounded, and 6 is very, very exaggerated. So we're gonna stay away from sound pack 6 right now. So let's go into 5 and let's just take a basic hit. Okay, so we have a lot of different ones. These are probably very loud, so let's take a listen. And all I really do is listen through a whole bunch of them, and I pick one that I like. 13 sounds pretty good for this one, so let's do this. And I always tone it down just a little bit to make sure that sound effect does not exceed -6 decibels. So let's place it in the right position. So it's gotta start right around here. And then we just repeat the process for every single strike that we have. And we got a couple more hits to do. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 hits to do and a shove, okay? So when it comes to grounded sound design, basically you want to almost avoid cloth sound effects. And you really just want to focus on hits and blocks. That is it. You can hear at the beginning of this punch, you have a little bit of a cloth rustle before the hit. I'm gonna cut that out entirely and just have that match the punch and just have the punch sound effect. All right, and then he has one more shove. Let's add the shove in there. I'm gonna go into the body hits. Body hits typically are deeper in tones, and face hits are typically higher in tones. And then right here, we have a little bit of a movement that I do with my hands, so this might warrant a little extra whoosh. Okay, so that's pretty much it for just the punches. So now let's start moving into other things that are not punches, such as some movement. Something that I don't think we can get away with here with complete silence is this slow motion bit. So we're gonna have to add some sort of cloth movement. So I'm already in the cloth movement folder right here, so let's just find a good sound effect for it. And since this is grounded, that seems like the only cloth movement that we should add, honestly. Next part, this one's always fun. Next thing we're going to add is our wild sound. So what is wild sound? Wild sound is just lines that are recorded separately without the camera rolling. And in this case, the wild sound that you should always get whenever you are shooting a fight scene is efforts. So after the fight scene is done, either or even before, just get a whole lot of sounds and efforts from your actors of them just kind of like eating it a little. So like that. And of course, the best thing to do is to get wild sound on the set. But Sometimes whenever it's actually me in the fight scene, I would even record my wild sound here. But I actually do have a lot of wild sound from myself and Joe, so I'm just gonna get that wild sound in right now. All right, so I pulled in some wild sound from Joe and myself. And something that I really like to do when it comes to fight scenes is that one person is more vocal than the other. And that is something that you see in a lot of Hong Kong films. So one person is a little more vocal than the other. You hear more vocals coming from them, but the person who's not as vocal, when you hear their vocals, you know it sounds strong. So it's one of those things, right? The less of it there is, I guess, the more quality. In this case, for me, I'm gonna make myself a little less vocal. I'm gonna make Joe a little bit more vocal. I'm gonna introduce my first one in here, something like this. This one right here. That's a good one. So let's just layer that in right before the strike. Get it up to audio. Awesome. This one right here. Just add that in there. I'm gonna lower it down real low. Line it up. I'm gonna add one more effort on this last punch, maybe even the strike. And I might even delay that grunt, so you hear the strike first and then you hear his grunt. That, I'd say, does it for just this first bit of the fight scene. So we've added the punches, we've added a little bit of cloth movement, and we added a little bit of efforts. So now that we've layered in all the sound effects where they need to go, it's time to do some signal processing. So the way that I do this, I know it's kind of weird, but I take everything, I nest it, I name this audio, and then I take that sequence and then I use that as the audio and put it underneath. So now I can basically turn off all these sound effects, and then now I have all the sound effects in one track. So the sound effects themselves sound great, however, they don't sound like they belong in the environment. There's no reverb or anything like that. So I'm gonna go into my effects and I'm gonna find something called, well, let's say reverb. And we're gonna use studio reverb. And let's just hit edit. And I know all you sound engineers are probably like, vomiting right now, but this is just how we do it. I just choose a preset and then I move it from there. So I would say let's do vocal reverb small because the living room is not all that big, and let's just see what that sounds like first. Sounds a little better, good. But now let's mess around with some of these things right here. The first thing I like to mess around with is dry and wet. So dry, all that is just the sound without any effects applied to it, and wet is the sound with the effect applied to it, right? And then so you balance. So if I take wet down entirely, all you're gonna hear is just the bass sound design. But if I take down dry and I bring up wet, all you're gonna hear is the reverb and the effect on it. Let's just keep it at its default. So let's say 70, 71-ish, whatever. But I'm gonna bring up the wet just a little bit so I can hear a little bit more of that reverb. All right, so I've played around with some of these settings and I've gotten a sound palette, I guess you could say, in terms of what I want to hear. So let's take a listen. For the purpose of this video, of course, I didn't go too in-depth with these settings right here, but of course for your projects, be as specific as you'd like. But yeah, let's move on to the more exaggerated sound design. Again, what we're gonna do here, start with the hits and then move to the specifics later. So now I'm gonna move into number 6 and let's find a hit that's very, very exaggerated, which is basically all of these. Ready? That one already sounds great. So let's add that on there. And this time we're gonna be using a lot of cloth movement and a lot of whooshes. That is what exaggerated fight sound design sounds more like. Okay, so I just layered in the hits only, so let's take a look at it. Two very different sounding styles, right? Now, let's keep moving. Same thing. Let's move on to the cloth movement. Right here at the beginning, whenever I gear up for the kick, again, let's use some cloth movement. This sounds good for just the movement and the build-up. However, there still is quite a bit of silence, and we butterfly cut. So you see I'm already about to throw the kick right here, but in the next shot, I'm doing it again. We need to fill this silence right here. There is a little bit too dead of a section right here. So, and since we're going very exaggerated, let's add a slow motion sound effect. So let's go into the slow motion tab. Now let's hear some cool slow motion sound effects. All right, awesome. So you hear the build up to the slow motion, which is the movement. You hear the slow motion sound effect that carries us all the way through, and then the strike to end that little bit. So let's hear it. And let's add a little bit more flair to this little bit where I'm stumbling backwards. Let's add the sound of me stumbling backwards and the hand movement. So let's copy the hand movement, but now let's add another stumble sound effect. All right, so I found a sound effect. Let's get it to -18, -6. Let's put it into position. Okay, so we've added our punches, we've added our cloth movement, we added some slow motion sound effects. Now let's add our efforts, our wild sound. I'm just gonna use the same sound effect that I did before, that little growl that I have whenever I throw the kick. You know what, I'm also gonna add a little bit of a build-up to this movement on the first punch. And one of my favorite build-ups is a reverse gunshot sound. You've probably heard it before, actually. You just didn't know what it was. So let's find a gunfire sound effect. Let's just do a pistol. And I want to use a sound effect that has the sound of, like, the metal of the gun clicking. All right, I got this sound effect right here. You can really hear the sound of that bullet coming out of the gun. So hear that, listen to that metal clank. Awesome, I'm gonna layer that in. I'm going to definitely turn that down a little bit because that's very loud. And I'm going to reverse it. So let's go speed duration, reverse speed, and let's just line that up. And it looks like I don't have space, so let's add another track. And let's just throw it in there. And let's just line it up. Okay, funny problem that I'm running into here, right? This gunshot really builds up that first punch. However, this punch, when it lands, sounds very underwhelming. Again, that is one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to beginners making fight scenes. Underwhelming moments, okay? We don't want to blue ball our audience here, so take a listen to how it sounds right now. That first sound effect sounds horrible in comparison to this build-up. So let's find a more aggressive sounding punch. Okay, so we just found a new sound effect, layered it in there. See what it sounds like now. Okay, let's get Joe's wild sound in that same spot. I'm also gonna add some of my wild sound right here on this second punch. One of my favorite wild sounds that I always do is this. Whoa! I open my mouth at the end, so let's use that one. Make sure it's audible. So this wild sound is a little too mashed up with the punch so you can't hear it, so let's start it a little earlier. And I'm also going to add a little bit of my effort at the end after I get shoved back. Sounds good because I'm getting hit in the chest, so I got to feel that cough. And for fun, let's add a slow motion sound effect at the end for Joe. All right, that is basically like double the sound effects that we added in there compared to the grounded version. Now it's time for signal processing. Same process, select everything, name whatever you like. Let's take that audio unlink it, so now we just have the audio. Let's layer that in at the bottom, and let's disable all these sound effects, or you can just right click and then enable disable right here. I actually don't want to signal process or add reverb onto Joe's little movement right here. The slow motion doesn't need to reverb, so I'm just gonna cut, and I'm only gonna apply it to here. Same thing, look for reverb, studio reverb, add it onto the clip with all your sound effects in it. Let's go to effect controls. Same process. Let's try room ambiance, see what that sounds like. I'm gonna up the wet a little bit so I can hear that sound. And then you can play around with this as much as you like. Okay, so that was our grounded sound design and our exaggerated sound design. Let's see what the two sound like. And just remember guys, of course, there is no right or wrong answer. You can go grounded, you can go exaggerated, whichever one fits your story the best, go with it. And you don't necessarily need to buy a sound effects combo pack like I did. You can totally find a lot of great sound effects online that are for free. Just remember, do not ever make your fight sound design underwhelming. That is the biggest beginner mistake. No fight scene in a movie ever has sound design that sounds like light slapping. Even if you're going with the grounded style, you do need to exaggerate it just a little bit. All right, that's all I got for you guys in this video. I hope you learned something today. And if you made it to the end of this video, dude, you know I appreciate you. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And I recommend that you watch this video next. It's the last video that I did about fight scenes. It's an absolutely awesome one. You don't want to miss it. And if you have any more questions, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video.